I know there are going to be some watchers of this podcast who maybe aren't even watching anymore because this one is going to be so weird compared to the others. It's going to be so different compared to the others. And I will say to them, if you happen to stay throughout this, let me acknowledge it's weird. It is different. It is unusual. But I do the normal stuff. I do all of the normal when it comes to leadership development. I do all the normal things, and they're all great, but sometimes they don't feel like enough. People are looking for something more. And this is my effort to at least expose us to something that might be more. Welcome to the Leadership Disrupted podcast. Now, the thesis of this podcast is that what the world needs from leaders today is shifting, has in fact been evolving for some time. And we, on this show, we explore the nature of leading others through a variety of perspectives, trying to gain insight into this new leadership approach. And today's guest, Kris Land, is going to join us on this journey. He's an award-winning author of The Infinity Within. He's a visionary leader, creator whose work bridges spiritual awakening, healing, and conscious creation, all on the foundation of his deep business background, which we're going to be talking about as well. Kris is a veteran CEO and serial entrepreneur. He's founded 12 high-tech companies. He's achieved 11 successful exits and 1 IPO. After a profound personal and professional transformation, he dedicated his life to helping people remember who they truly are and live from truth and wholeness. He's also a husband and father of 3 boys, and he joins us today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Kris, first of all, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Very much appreciate being here.
I would like to start with your background. If we could go way back a bit, because your business and technical background, I think, really informs your current area of focus in a really unique way. So I guess as far back as you are comfortable, it doesn't have to be I was born a poor black child. It can be. I guess you can decide how far back you want to go. But if you could share with us that business journey, and we'll kind of drift into more of the internal awakening stuff as well.
Sounds good. Well, it's interesting because my spiritual and introspective journey started right after my very first entrepreneurial journey. So I grew up in North Dakota. I was very much an introvert, did not do well with others. And I started playing with electronics from Radio Shack at the age of 10. And that'll age me quite a bit because Radio Shack I don't think exists anymore. And I was always very into electronics, which then turned into computers. And fortunately, in Bismarck, we had this place called Team Electronics that was the first reseller of Apple II. And so in my second year of junior high, I started working at the store selling computers and really learning in depth how to program. And I got pretty competent in programming. Now, in parallel to this going on, I had a number of very strange things. Well, when I say strange, not real things happen to me. I had out-of-body experiences starting at the age of 6. I had near-death experiences at the age of 15. And so this was in parallel to me being an electronic and computer geek. Mm-hmm. And so I was very fortunate. One of the people that bought their first computer for me needed accounting software for his 3rd generation farming family. And so he bought his computer. We started talking. I knew how to program. He knew how to write, or he knew what he wanted in accounting. So he told me what to write, and then I coded it. And we got that built, and then a couple of years later, we sold it and made a bunch of money, which normally you would think would be pretty cool. And it gave me freedom in the future. But what it caused me right at that point was a complete depressive state.
Well, how much money did you end up having in your pocket at the age of what, 17, 18?
A bunch.
A bunch. Okay. I think in the pre-interview you used the technical term crap load. So you had a lot of money. Yes.
More than somebody at that age probably should have.
More than any 17-year-old in North Dakota, I'm betting.
Probably, because North Dakota is a pretty conservative state. So anyway, nowadays, of course, I can directly look at all the stories of people who've won the lottery and have destroyed their lives. And I have at least one version of how that works. And that is that when I achieved that financial success, I thought I'd also achieved all the goals I ever thought I was going to, because I was taught in the materialistic world that you work hard, you make a bunch of money, and you're done. So what happened is I didn't feel like I had any place else to go. So in order to start kind of clawing my way out of that, I created 3 goals that I can never fully accomplish, but that I can do every day. And that's to have fun, learn, and do neither at the harm or impedance of others. Mm-hmm. And with those 3 little hooks, I was able to start clawing my way out into the more spiritual side, because I also had a very strong curiosity in theologies. So I've studied multiple different theologies. And that was the genesis of writing The Infinity Within. However, I'm not going to go into a lot of details now on that, because we're going to stay on the business subject a little bit more. But what happened is the entire idea for the book was done at that time. And then at around the age of 20, I hired a ghostwriter to write the book, because I was not a book writer at that time. And I wasn't comfortable writing it. And the ghostwriter continued to want to make it her own story.
Okay.
So I fired the ghostwriter. And I took all my notes and put them in a filing cabinet. And they sat there for 40 plus years. So now to go into more of the technological side of things, that once I kind of got a lot of my answers of why I'm here, or why we're all here, and what we're doing here, and how this kind of all works, at least my understanding of how this all works, it allowed me to really start looking at, what do I love doing? And I love creating. I love creating companies. I love creating products for companies. I love doing things that nobody's ever done before. And so that's what got me on this entrepreneurial path. And then I was fortunate enough of selling the first company that I always looked at every company I started as great. The company is my product for the exit strategy. So my products are for my company, but my company is for my exit strategy. So I always had a very different view on why I set up a company than I think a lot of people. Understanding, I don't think anybody has to have an exit strategy for their company, but if you go there, at least in a thought process, it gives you a very different set of goals and understanding of what you need to do for the company and organize it. So I think that's very useful.
Well, and I think for someone like you, one of the practical implications is that you never make any of those companies too much a part of who you are, like a deep part of who you are. Whereas many leaders, they'll get their first significant leadership role for an organization. And I'm not saying you shouldn't identify with your business. Of course you should. You should identify with it. You should be proud of it. It should be a part of you. But that can go way too far. If suddenly your business is who is you, and you are your business, that's probably not all.
Absolutely. Having your company be a part of you is okay, but having you become entirely part of a part of your company,
yeah,
that's not okay. And quite frankly, I was a workaholic for many years. I mean, we're talking 17 hours days, 7 days a week work schedules.
Talk us through a couple of the highlights of the technical product and company development, because I went through your LinkedIn profile and I went through all of those experiences, and then I did a deep dive into some of those companies, and it's not just because I find it personally interesting. I think it does change how we look at you by realizing, oh, you're somebody who has accomplished all of this. And I know it's maybe hard to toot your own horn, but go ahead and toot a little bit if you don't mind.
I'm not very good at that, and intentionally so. It's, even though I've created these companies, I created it with my employees and my partners. What made those companies were the people I worked with and the people that believed in what we were doing. I may have provided some guidance and some leadership, but it's the people that make it work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the things that I'm proud of, a company I had called Paradox wrote some software called Paramail, which was one of the only 3 email packages available at that time. We were working directly with Ray Norda out of Novell, which was the networking company at that time. And he had funded both my company and also another company called OAZ Communications, which was our fax board company. We had an email system that ran in DOS as what was called a CSR, terminal reference software. So it shrunk itself and then expanded when you needed it in memory. We tied in the NetFax product, which we wrote, which was a server-based inbound, outbound fax system. We built an OCR server with Palantir Corporation. They built the cards. We built the server where you could receive a fax through DTMF code, meaning touch tone, have it routed to the OCR server, have it converted to a Word document, have it emailed to you as a Word document ready to work on.
Wow.
And this was back in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really fun. We were doing stuff that was what I would call bleeding edge at the time. It was a lot of fun, and we did a lot of cool things with it.
So given that technical background, and in the show notes, I'll include all the appropriate links. So if somebody really wants to deep dive into all things Kris Land, we'll give them the links to go there. But also, I imagine that technical background gives you an interesting point of view on artificial intelligence and how AI is impacting our world today. But here's what I think would make the most sense, or would be the most interesting. Let's go down the woo-woo route for a bit, and let's explore that, and then we'll pull ourselves back to AI, because the profound implications of how AI is changing the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about each other, not just the way that we work, but the way we think about our work. You and I haven't talked about this before. I'm interested to find out how you think and feel about that, and what your intuition is telling you about the future going forward into AI. But we'll mentally set that aside for just a moment. Let's talk about your spiritual awakening, if that's the right word. And you said it started young, but then went dormant for a while, or was it always there? Was it always a part of you?
Well, the construct of the book and the notes of the books, of course, was the spiritual trip. It was the awakening of a different way of thinking and looking at life. And even though I put the notes of writing the book in the filing cabinet, everything that I put together, so originally I put it together for me, not as a book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to put it as a book so I wouldn't forget what I'd done, right? So the notes and everything became very ingrained in the way that I moved through life from that point forward. It's the way I look at things. It's the way I operate around things. It's the way I respond to both people and things as I move through life. So I was very fortunate that because of that deep depression, it forced me to make some very life-changing questions. It made me answer them for myself.
Mhm.
And by doing that, it then created a place for me to play from as I move forward.
I know a lot of us, I'm going to say myself included, we find ourselves at a relatively young age. If we're ambitious, we get on the treadmill and we tread.
Run,
We
run.
Yeah, and then you're running, and it's you're not getting as far as you expected to get, as quickly as you expected to get. So you run faster, maybe you run differently, and then over the last, say, 3 or 4 decades, the treadmill itself starts going faster and faster. So just to keep pace, when you think about the impact of email, when you think about the impact of global media, there is so much coming at us, because when I got email, everybody else is getting email. So suddenly none of these technologies actually give me much of a competitive advantage, because everyone else is getting them at the same time. All it does is raise the bar. I have to now be more productive, faster, better, and in the end, I don't really feel like I'm getting ahead. And I talk to a lot of leaders today who are overwhelmed by the pace of business, the complexity of business, the what's being asked of them, what's being put on their shoulders, and they feel like, if anything, they're falling a bit behind. And then one thing I'll add to that is, then social media actually creates this impression for many of us that, well, everyone else is doing fine, everyone else is great.
Yeah.
Every other young guy is driving a Bugatti, and everyone else has 8% body fat, and everyone else has all of these fantastic things. I'm the only one. I'm slowly falling behind, and it's there's this whole mix of things that puts pressure on people. I would love to hear, I guess, your point of view or your thoughts on how we can make sense of our world today, and maybe not get so caught up on that treadmill.
That's a complex question, Dan. So let me answer it with a business answer first, and then a woo-woo answer. The business answer is, when I was in San Diego and Northern California, I was very ingrained in the technology space and the treadmill. But I intentionally wanted to be there. Then I started a family with my wife, and we moved to Texas. And I kind of disconnected from the technology space that I was doing at that time. And I did that intentionally. But then in Texas, I found some things that I really wanted to do. So I created a thing called Building Wealth Clinic, which there's a link to. And it is a mentorship program where somebody can hire me to be their mentor for, I think the smallest is 3 months and 6 months in a 1-year program, where I help them with their business, align them with their products and what they're trying to do and build, and get them out of well, there's a couple of things. I can help them get out of the plateaus, but I think probably the most powerful thing that I love doing is being a brainstorming mentor, where if you're stuck in a place or having some difficulties, we get on a call like this and we work through it and process it. So that's, from the business side, kind of a short answer to your question. Mm-hmm. The infinity within answer is a little deeper, and I'll try to keep it short. When I started back in my 20s looking at what it is we do here, my boss at the time with the bank down in San Diego was an atheist, and completely, very strongly believed that we're nothing but a piece of clay, and we're here for one life, and that's it. And his name coincidentally was Kris as well. And even though I have zero problem with people believing whatever they want to believe, it didn't sit right for me for him.
Mhm.
So I kind of spent some time on it, and I used my engineering way of doing things, and I came up with 4 questions that when you go through them, it actually shows that there's all the upside is in believing we have a soul, and all the downside is in believing we don't, regardless if we do or don't. So it shows all the benefit in believing we do. And it actually turned him around. He actually went through the questions and went,
Mhm.
huh, okay. Well, that led me to my next step, was great. If we all have souls, what does that mean? What is it? And so then all my background and all the theologies I studied went splash.
Uh-huh.
And the Bible is the easiest because the chapters and verses in the Bible are really clear. You know, it's like boom, boom, boom. There are many chapters and verses where God, Jesus, and the disciples say things like, "We are the children of God. We will inherit all of the abilities of God." Jesus tells his disciples, "You will do everything I've done," meaning parting oceans and healing people and much, much more. Okay, so what does all this mean? Well, a lot of religions tend, and I'm not trying to beat anybody. Again, I don't, if you want to believe this is great. It never sat right with me as a child, but that's okay. Is that we take Jesus and God and put them up on a pedestal and we worship them, which is certainly fine. But what became evident, and what really became evident when I wrote the book, is maybe there's a slightly different twist to what is actually going on. Maybe what Jesus was saying is, please don't worship me. Watch what I'm doing, learn from it, because you're exactly the same and can do everything I'm doing. And what's ironic is all the religions, Buddha, Eckhart Tolle, I mean, we could go through a whole bunch of different religious leaders. They're all saying the same thing. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'm showing you what you can do and what you are. Great. So then I'm saying, okay, well, for a soul, that means we're gods. Okay, well, what does that mean? And so now I don't know how far you want me to go in this, Dan, because it gets a little bit deep for a second. Is that okay?
It is, and here's why it is okay. First of all, because I wanted to be, but secondly, there's a very specific reason why I asked you to be here today, and it is because I'm a heathen. Honestly, I'm a heathen, not because I necessarily want to be. One of my best friends, his name is Larry Julian. He's the author of God is My CEO. He's a well-regarded Christian writer. He and I have known each other for more than 20 years. We spend a lot of time together, and it does not sit well with Larry that I am basically this heathen engineer. And we've had lots of conversations, and I what I can't do is fool myself. I don't feel comfortable saying, well, yeah, you know what? It would be better for me if I believed. Oh, it would actually, life would be better if I believed. But I struggle with but that doesn't really matter. It either is or is not. And the reason it makes sense for this podcast focused on leadership is because I think a lot of leaders today are feeling a little light, a little unprepared for the challenges of this world. And the answers are not in, okay, we'll run you through a training program where you'll learn OKRs, or you'll learn how to give feedback, or you'll learn how to receive feedback. I mean, I've developed over 60 leadership development programs, and they're all fantastic, but they don't speak to this, like this deeper need. And the last thing I'll say about that is, it doesn't seem to me to like the meek are actually inheriting the earth. So I struggle with when I look out at the world, and it does not look like the good guys are winning. It does. And so I saw your work. I did a little bit of a deep dive, and I thought, all right, here would be a great person to at least explore this with. Maybe not an easy conversation, because because it's not. But so go as deep as you want to go, Kris.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. So I'm going to go into kind of what I was able to come out with and wrote in the Infinity Within as a construct from kind of an engineering point of view. And I did that from a curiosity and question system. So the 4 questions, I'll just go through them real quick because it's just 4 quick questions. Okay, so assuming we're a piece of clay, meaning we do not have a soul, and we believe we don't have a soul, quid pro quo, we're even. There's no harm, no foul, right? If we're a piece of clay, meaning we have no soul, and we believe we have a soul, then the worst thing that happens is that we expand a little bit and do some really cool things. However, if we have a soul and we do not believe we have a soul, then we're going to be stuck. But if we have a soul and believe we have a soul, we get to expand into what we might become. So that's the genesis of, regardless of whether we can prove we have one or not, there's a lot of benefit in stretching that direction. Okay, so now I'll continue the story that I started. So assuming we have a soul, it's a godlike entity based on all the different religions and all the different discussions. Well, okay, what does that really mean? Well, a godlike entity exists outside of time. And well, what does that do? What does a soul do? Well, first off, we're all totally interconnected because we all become what some people call the source and those things. I could only come up with 3 things that a godlike entity actually can do. They can destroy, they can create anything, universes, constructs, everything. They can destroy all those things, and they can play games. Okay, great. So, sorry, my nose is itching. So, playing games. Well, what does that mean? Why do people play Monopoly?
Distraction, fun.
Experience each other, spend time with each other. Okay. And what makes a game?
Competition, uncertainty.
Pieces.
Pieces, yeah.
Turns and rules.
Got it.
Okay. So, great. Let's call the planet Earth the game of Earth. What makes the game of Earth interesting? Well, the only thing I could come up with is that the game of Earth exists in a 4th dimensional universe, meaning that time is the primary motivator. And when you go in the 3rd dimension or below, time doesn't exist. And when you go in the 5th and above, time is there, but it's not the primary motivator anymore. So the unique thing about this particular game is the movement of time. Okay, so I'm a soul. I look at this game of Earth. I could only come up with one thing that would be of interest in the game of Earth to a soul. You want to take a stab at it?
I'm going to say no. I do not want to guess.
Okay. You've actually already said it, but it's experience emotions, experience. And I don't mean just the good ones. From a soul's perspective, I want to exercise and know all the emotions, the entire scope of it. Great. Okay, that's a reason for playing this game. Now, what's interesting is, do you play tic-tac-toe?
I do. I mean, I have.
How often do you play it and how much?
Not frequently, because it's a little, simple.
Pretty darn boring, right?
Yeah.
I mean, after the first couple of times, it's like, yeah, everybody can block everybody. It's not a very complex game. Well, okay, if you're a soul, you're going to pick a pretty hard game to play. You're not going to pick tic-tac-toe to play. So the game of Earth, by definition, is going to be pretty challenging if all these souls are playing it. So then we go to the point of, okay, what would the rules look like? Well, we'll call them the pearly gates. We're up here as a soul. We're getting ready to enter into the game at the very first turn. The first rule would be we agree to put all of our godlike abilities to the side. Now, why would we do that? Well, same with Monopoly. If I go into Monopoly and I just grab all the hotels and say, Dan, you don't get any, what fun is that? You're not going to want to play the game with me, right? So the first rule is we agree to put our abilities, our godlike abilities to the side. Well, that kind of works, except here's where the second rule comes to play. When I'm out experiencing this game and my favorite dog runs across the street and gets run over, but I'm still tied into my godly abilities, I go, that didn't happen. And I change it. Well, I'm not going to really experience emotion in depth if I can change anything I don't like. So rule number 2 is I forget that I ever had them. Okay. That in itself becomes a trap, because if I only have those 2 rules, a piece of me will be stuck in this game for eternity. Well, soul's not dumb. So a soul's going to say, no, my third rule is I'm going to have turns. And in those turns, I'm going to set certain goals and tasks that I'd like to accomplish. And when I'm done with all the turns that I've decided I want to do, I'll leave the game. So what does a turn look like? It looks like a life. So each lifetime, we have certain things that we've already predetermined that we'd like to learn, experience, and do. And if we don't do them, we get to do the life over and over and over until we figure it out. And remember, we've agreed to forget everything. So it's a little more challenging to actually remember what we're supposed to be doing. But we eventually get there, and then we go to the next turn and the next turn and the next turn, eventually leave, right? Which explains reincarnation in a big way. Which, by the way, goes all the way back to the Egyptians and before. And so then rule 4 is that we agree to, when we put a part of ourselves here, that we're fully invested in that we're going to fully participate in this game. And then there's more rules beyond that, which we can discuss or read the book or whatever. So with that foundation, that says that why we're here, the reason we're here is to experience emotion, that we are godlike entities that have agreed to forget that, and that we're playing out turns to accomplish certain things that we've predetermined. Now, that doesn't mean that fate or that everything is predetermined what you're going to do. What it says is there's certain high-level goals that you want to accomplish, and how you get there is totally up to each lifetime. Okay? Then there's another thing that adds more challenge to the game. Have you ever heard of the concept of the archons?
I have not.
So the agnostics define the archons as gods or creators of reality, and that they feed on emotion, and specifically negative emotion, and have us corralled in here on purpose. I don't take quite that, because if we're souls, meaning we're gods, we're not going to agree to that kind of system. But we could agree to having archons playing and providing interference. And I'm going to use a couple words in a second, but I'm going to hold off on them. But they're here to make the game harder, really hard and harder on a per turn basis. And the Bible actually references them besides other religions, but it's the interference, and I'll get to it, which one of the tools they use is fear and doubt in order to keep the illusion of what's real in front of us. And so to the extent that we can start identifying that when we're fearful, now there's 2 kinds of fears in the world, right? There's the fear where the saber-toothed tiger is chasing me down the hill, and if I don't run, I'm going to get eaten. That's a very visceral fear, and you got to pay attention to it in a big way, right? Then there's the mental fear. The fear where I'm afraid of doing something. I don't want to ask for a raise, or I'm afraid of talking to somebody, or I'm afraid of doing whatever it is. I look at those things as signposts. They're designed, in my mind, to take a look at the fear and then go underneath it and say, what doubts are popping up for me? And then when I can target and start asking what doubts, just by asking and looking at the doubts, you start taking away their power from stopping you just by looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the premises I have in the Infinity Within is that as you eliminate doubt, you're able to start piercing the veil and doing and reconnecting to what you really are. And I would argue that people like Jesus and Buddha and Eckhart Tolle, and it's funny because my mom was, she goes, why did you include this person in your book? And the fourth person in the introduction of my book is, we've got Jesus, we've got Buddha, we've got Eckhart Tolle, and Elon Musk. Well, why do I include Elon Musk? He's not a spiritual leader per se, but what he's done is when people tell him he can't do something, he not only does it, but he does it in spades. So by removing doubt and removal and the woo-woo stuff is not just about spiritual teleporting and doing those things, but it's also about construction of taking what's in your mind and creating it in reality. And if you look at what Elon's done, they said you cannot do a car manufacturing in this age, it will fail. Well, Tesla's arguably the biggest car manufacturer in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Out of nowhere.
Without a doubt.
Okay. You can't reuse and land rockets. That's impossible. NASA's spent billions of dollars. No, I'll go ahead and do that. So now he's reusing rockets and sending up tons of stuff by doing it, right? Oh, it's impossible to run multiple companies of any size. Yeah, he's done that too. So by removing doubt and reattaching and remembering who we are, we start drawing on what we're really able to do. And where, Jesus parts oceans and heals people, Buddha causes this ability to really go beyond the material world and experience other things, and so on and so forth. I would argue that all the theologies and teachers are there to show us that we are connected beings, that we're not small. In the material world, typically the schools and even our parents, who don't mean to do this, they're just taught to do this. Have you ever heard of how children are able to see ghosts and they see things that are not technically real?
Oh, without a doubt. In fact, when I was young, I heard voices.
Okay.
Distinctly heard voices, yes.
And you were told that you were imagining it, and it's not real.
I never told anybody, honestly, until
you were embarrassed to tell anybody.
Yeah,
that's
decades and decades later, I finally was willing to admit it, but because I knew it would be
it's not real. Yes. It's not right.
Yeah,
I would argue that those are giant signposts saying you are connecting right now. And what's fascinating to me, and even today when I do things that are considered not normal, let's say that I want to do, telekinesis or bend a spoon or whatever I want to do, and then I do it. I can watch the first emotion that pops up is elation. Oh my God, I did it. And immediately within microseconds of doing it, you didn't do it. It was make believe. It didn't happen. It's not real. You can't tell anybody. And all this doubt that comes dropping in like this huge curtain. These are the things that are meant in the game to keep us small. The things that happen that are out of the ordinary are meant to show you what's behind the curtain.
So some people will call that synchronicity or circumstance, coincidence. And I mean, I've definitely experienced those moments where you think, that makes no sense. And it feels magical in the moment. In the moment, it's like, woo. It is definitely
Huge exhilaration.
Something is going on, but it's pretty easy. After a few hours, days, weeks, you simply persuade yourself
to write it off.
Yes, in a universe with 7 billion people, eventually, these two things are going to happen. One at the same time. You can convince yourself that it really wasn't that. You're absolutely right.
The world teaches you to actually make sure you don't give it any credibility.
Yeah,
absolutely. So one of the things I focus on throughout the book is not designed to preach to anybody. It's not designed to tell you, you got to believe this. That's not why I wrote it or how I wrote it. You follow, it's a non-fictional memoir of my life with a fictional character named Gabriel, which was intentionally chosen because the Archangel Gabriel. And he goes by Gabe. And he goes through his life. You follow through the chapters his life and meeting Elias, his mentor. And you get to play with the things he does if you choose to, all the way to teleportation and partial teleportation and what that means and how that looks and how that feels. And it gives you stepping stones of how to get there if you want to. But the things I had, I'll touch real quickly on two things that happened to me growing up that all of the listeners can take with a grain of salt. These two things were very real. I actually had a third one that was discussed and went through and was amazing. But even today, I take and sprinkle it with salt because it's like, that's just way out there. When I was 6, I had my first complete out-of-body experience, and everything became ethereal. Everything felt like smoke or like very light tissue paper. I remember picking up a toy train, and it had no substance at all. It was like it was pretty solid train, but it had like no substance. And after picking that up and all that, I freaked out. I ran up to my parents, and it all went away. And of course, they told me I was dreaming or whatever. At 8 years old, it happened again, and I could hear like an infinite number of voices talking to me. I could see through everything. Walls didn't exist. I mean, it was very, very odd and strange. And again, I freaked out, ran up to my parents, and it went away. And both those experiences you can just write off as, I was dreaming. I ate the wrong food or whatever story we'd like to say. The third time happened when I was 12. Everything is all stretching. And by this time, I'd started working and earning money. And one of the first things I bought, because I thought it was really cool, and today, of course, you don't see them anymore, is a Cal King waterbed.
I remember.
And they're huge.
Yeah.
And they're heavy. Okay? And I'm sitting downstairs in my room, and my back is against my waterbed. And it was one of those dark pine waterbeds with the mirror in the middle and the shelves, right? And this out of body happens, and I kind of move around, and I'm playing around with it. And I take my finger and I push the waterbed, and it moves 3 inches. Scared the crap out of me.
The entire bed, the entire
whole damn bed. Scared the crap out of me. Ran up to my folks. It all went away. However, the next morning I go downstairs, and there's a mark in the carpet where the waterbed used to be sitting. That kind of takes the gray out of it. Second thing that happened that takes the gray out of things for me, again, all you listeners, you sprinkle this with because I'm pretty sure it's probably happened something similar to each one of you, because in all the different people I've talked to, and I'll take a short segue before I get to the second one. Through my entire life, I will be in a coffee shop, a restaurant, in a park, and I'll have random people come up, actually pull out a chair, sit down next to me, tell me their life story, have a discussion, and get up and walk away.
Wow.
And for a while, I used to call that coincidences. It was a coincidence the guy came and talked to me, because what I learned from each one of those is whatever they had to say, I needed to hear, and whatever I said, they needed to hear. Which is why the original title of the book was going to be called Soul Paths, meaning that our paths meet, right? So every single one of those people, and I mean all, had different not real or magical things that happened to them through their lives, but they didn't know how to attach to them, or wouldn't want. They shared them with me because I was just this person at this chair, right? But they typically were embarrassed to share it with anybody. They didn't want to tell anybody, or if they did tell anybody, the people went, "Oh yeah, that didn't happen." And so what I found is every single one of us has had these looking through the curtain experiences. But now my second one that I want to talk about that was very real opens up the curtain like a blowtorch. And that's called a near-death experience, or NDE. There's only one of two things that happens with an NDE. You make it through and you blowtorch the curtains for a moment, or you don't make it through and you're done with this term. That's it.
Yeah.
So in my case, I got my first car when I was 15, because in North Dakota, you get to drive young. We lived out of town. My dad was a rancher. And they gave me a Mach 2 Mustang. And in the first month, I had 5 accidents. But they were little accidents. Like my very first one, I remember, it's in North Dakota, it snows and it's icy. And I'm driving and I hit the brakes and I kind of slide into this motorhome that's parked. Didn't do any damage, but I'm freaking out. It's my first accident. Oh my God. So I went and rang their doorbell. I said, "I am so sorry. I ran into your RV out here and I'm really sorry." And they come out with me and they look, there's no damage to my car. There's no damage to the RV. And they just kind of laugh at me, go, "Why did you even ring the doorbell? Why did you bother?" But what happened is each one of those accidents got a little bit bigger. The 6th accident was a lady in a full-size Cadillac that ran a stop sign, T-barred my car, and moved the passenger door about halfway in. Now, neither of us got hurt, but the car got hurt. But my dad, for some odd reason, decided to repair the car. So he fixes the car, he gets it put back together. I was working at a place called Team Electronics, which was in town, and the dealership was right next door, and I lived out of town on a thing called Old Highway 10. And I pick up the car that night, and I'm driving it home, and I'm a teenager, so I'm driving 60, 70 miles an hour, which I shouldn't be doing because it's not very wide. And on the sides of the road are kind of like slopes, and there's snow. And here's this black pickup truck coming at me, and he's all over the road. Clearly a drunk driver. And so I pull off to the side enough that he goes by like by an inch and misses me. But now I have a new problem. The snow in the ditch is sucking my car down, and I'm headed for the concrete pylon of a bridge at 60 or 70 miles an hour. All I can tell you is there was this surge of light, a flash of energy, and the car goes 90 degrees across the road. I shear 6 trees off. The steering wheel punctures the seat where I was sitting. I'm hanging upside down from the steering wheel by my legs. The engine is torn out of the car, and I'm 3 feet off the ground. I crawl out of the car, go up to the road, and there's a half-inch pile of snow where the car went 90 degrees when it was doing 60, 70 miles an hour. I did not have a scratch on me. It took 3 wreckers to pull that car out of those trees. You tell me what's real and not real. Now, nobody was there. My parents came and got me, so they saw the thing. The wreckers saw the thing. The neighbor that was in the house behind the trees saw the thing. But other than that, everybody else can say, yeah, that didn't happen. But by having those things happen in not only a real feeling way, but where I have actual physical proof, like a car that's completely demolished around me, it changed my perspective on life in a really big way. So I would argue or ask that all of you listeners that have had those things happen, especially NDEs, because I wouldn't suggest anybody use an NDE to look through the curtain, because it's pretty significant, but it does burst the curtain wide open for a moment. You can do the more subtle stuff in approaching this. There's actually, it was 3 months after I finished my book and published it, one of the social media places showed a school in India where they have all the kids sitting on the floor, and they have these needles with these paper things on the needle, and then a glass globe so air doesn't blow it, and they're all concentrating on spinning it. And they're using telekinesis to move the paper. Everybody should do that. Because when you start moving it, the first thing you're going to do is, oh my God, I did it. Oh shit, that's not real. The wind blew. The earth shifted. Whatever excuse I can come up with. But then you sit there, do it again and again, and you just slowly work your way in to moving that paper around, and you start connecting, and you start parting that veil of what's real and what's really real. And that's in the book, The Infinity Within. I think it's chapter 9 is called The Orchard Hush, which is where Gabe really starts diving into the concept of whittling away, starting really small and working to bigger things. But every one of us is able to do this. There's the shortest version I can come up with.
So weaving those things together and thinking of life like this turn life as somewhat of a game, I do think that for a lot of us as leaders in businesses, we get frustrated by the challenges of the moment, by the minutia of the moment or the day, and by the people, the minutia of the people. And you said it, sometimes the most frustrating experiences or the most challenging experiences, those are actually why we're here. That's
the purpose.
We're not here just to have fun. If it was just about having fun, how boring is that? So sometimes those people who vex you the most, maybe it's not always true, but I imagine at least sometimes it's true that they're vexing you for a reason, and that contemplating why, the why behind that, there's something there. There's either something for them to learn, or for you to learn, or both of you to learn, or maybe just both of you to experience. But I will say this, and I want to say again, I am as skeptical can be. I am a dyed-in-the-wool cynic. I am, and I to some degree I hate myself for it. It's like I want to believe, but I just don't.
That's okay.
And with that said, I was in a coffee shop 3 weeks ago, and I'm by myself. I'm ordering a coffee and waiting for them to finish the order. And I look down, and there's a bookshelf. And this is a coffee shop in Jamestown, North Dakota. And you know Jamestown. And I'm at a coffee shop, and I look, and down at the very bottom shelf, there's a little basket of books. And I reach in, and I pull out one of the books. And actually, this is the book. And I pull it out, and I open the book up to a chapter. And the heading of the chapter starts with a quote from the song "Against the Wind" by Bob Seger. So it's actually got that at the top, like the chapter title, and then that we were running against the wind sort of phrase from the song. Okay, fine. That kind of makes sense. It made sense for the chapter. On the radio, in that moment, I pause for a second, and there's Bob Seger singing "Against the Wind" on the radio in the moment. And it was one of those things where you say to yourself, now, come on. That I walk into a coffee shop that I'd never been in before. I look down on the bottom shelf of a bookshelf. A little book catches my eye. I pull it out. I open it up to a random page. There is that quote, and then it happens to be playing on the radio. And so I say that, and I say to you, I'm a cynic, I'm a skeptic, I'm a non-believer, but there are just some things you can't ignore. It's like it feels sometimes like the world is saying to me, okay, you've had 66 years as a cynic. Maybe it's time to wake up. Maybe it's time to whatever. So I'm, I, I say to other leaders, I think the world is looking for something from us because the world's in trouble. The world is in trouble. You look at, I mean, if you don't feel that, if you can't see that around you, you can't feel the craziness, feel the struggle. You and I grew up in a time when there were world leaders, there were governmental, societal leaders that everyone could admire, or maybe 80% of us could admire. I don't think any of us could name anyone that 80% of people admire. You mentioned Elon Musk. Elon Musk's got a really strong faction of admirers and a very strong faction of detractors. And the same is true, you name anyone else. And so I think there's a yearning for leaders we can respect, leaders we want to follow, leaders we're drawn to follow, a yearning for something more from us. And I don't know what the answer is within all of that. But my book experience just says to me, don't not pay attention. And
be curious.
Yeah. There's something, whatever the thing is, there's something. And if there is something, I mean, really, if there is even a small something,
it gets bigger behind it.
Yeah, then it's probably not small. If that door cracks open where you say, well, there's got to be a thing. Well, if there's got to be a thing, then most likely that thing is bigger and bigger as you think about it. When people read The Infinity Within, how do they react? I'm sure you have people reaching out to you, talking to you about the book and about how it impacted them. What do they say to you?
I have been extremely blessed that the people that have left reviews, both in Audible and Amazon and different places, they're all 5 stars, and they're all statements around that it fundamentally changed the way they looked at things at that time. It made them feel safer in their own skin. It gave them a brighter outlook on where things are going and more control over what they were doing in their decisions. And it gave them tools to stop doubting themselves and stop fearing the fear.
I think if you can help people stop fearing the fear, stop getting caught up in the worry about the worst implications of whatever's happened, that can be huge. And I say that as somebody whose entire life has been, and I've done well, but I've done well out of fear, out of paranoia. Work out of paranoia. Save out of paranoia. Push oneself out of paranoia. Sometimes push others harder out of paranoia. And at a certain point, well, I can share this as well. When I was an infant, I had spinal meningitis. Back at a time when spinal meningitis was a death sentence. It was, it's still really serious today, but it's not the death sentence that it used to be. And in fact, my parents told me when I was young that they brought the priest in, and the priest had read the last rites, and I was essentially expected to pass on. That experience, I don't know what it did, but I always felt like it did something. Like there was something that was retained from that experience. But like you said, it's easy through the passage of time to minimize it, to just say, okay, yeah, it happens, and move on. But
I can tell you,
I would go ahead.
You were meant to be here.
Yeah, and that's the lesson I took. That all of this is bonus time. Like this is
You were not meant to leave yet. You were meant to be here. Your path was not completed for this turn then. You are still in it.
And cross one's fingers. Hopefully I'm still meant to be here and that it's not quite done yet. Now, who knows? Again, who knows? But when I said to you, when I was young, I heard voices. The voices were very consistent, and they consistently said this phrase: "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And I can remember eventually those voices faded, like I couldn't hear them anymore. I would try to, like I would try, you reach a certain age where I just didn't hear them anymore. And I wish if I'd had that voice at various points in my life to just say, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay." Yeah, it's not easy, maybe not fun, maybe not comfortable, maybe a lot of other not so great adjectives, but it's going to be okay. Because in the end, as it turned out, it was okay. It is okay. Life has a funny way of ultimately being better than okay. So as we wrap up, Kris, I know there are going to be some watchers of this podcast who maybe aren't even watching anymore because this one is going to be so weird compared to the others. It's going to be so different compared to the others. And I will say to them, if you happen to stay throughout this, let me acknowledge it's weird. It is different. It is unusual. But I do the normal stuff. I do all of the normal when it comes to leadership development. I do all the normal things, and they're all great. But sometimes they don't feel like enough. They don't, and I think that's part of what people are looking for, something more. And this is my effort to at least expose us to something that might be more, and something to at least explore a little further, a little deeper. Any last words you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Did you want to take a few minutes and tie in the AI side of things?
Yes. Thank you for having a much better memory than I am, because I have to imagine, given your deep technical background and now everything that you just shared with us, what is your point of view in terms of what's happening to the world through the advent of AI?
Well, I have the advantage. I started with AI when they were using the word, and it meant even less than it means now. So there was a company that did Lisp, which was a language that was supposed to be the language for creating AI. Pascal from UCSD Pascal was written as a possible software coding mechanism for writing artificially intelligent software. And I started working with both of those. They certainly weren't AI. They certainly weren't anywhere close to what we have now. Even today, they call it AI. It's not AI. They are advanced rule engines that take a bunch of data and through algorithms use weighted averages and things similar to our neurons in our brain to come up with answers. So they use a neuron-like tree pattern to take a bunch of data and create answers. But when you break it down, it's a rule engine. It's not AI. It's not artificially intelligent. It's incredibly good at taking a bunch of data and coming up with some answers. However, based on the acceleration of quantum computing qubits, which are the basis of how quantum computing works, some of the changes Microsoft has just had on, so a qubit is the thing that operates similar to a bit going on and off, except it can be in all states at once. And they have to be at near absolute freezing temperatures with completely magnetically sealed environments in order to operate. And I think the largest one right now has got, I want to say 10,000 qubits, maybe 100,000 qubits. I think that's too much. I think it's maybe only 10,000. And we're doing some phenomenal stuff with that. Microsoft has a new material and a new chip that they claim that on one device, they can get 100,000 qubits per device, and they can do multiple devices. So quantum computing changes the way computing is done in a huge way. So that's happening in parallel with
Mhm.
the current AI large language model engines that are running, which are now capable at college and above level degrees to write their own code, which means now we have code writing its own code. So now that accelerates the process of code growth and code complexity, and it looks exponential. That I would say, if you would have asked me a few years ago how long before we see what's called a singularity, I would have said maybe 30 years, 40 years. I'm betting now between 5 and 15 years, we're going to actually come up on the advent of what's called a singularity. Now, what is that? That is when a machine, a code base, becomes self-aware. Now, when that happens, there's multiple things. First off, a self-aware computer-based technology is going to grow at an exponential rate and will bypass our intelligence faster than we even know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, we are now totally an interconnected planet around technology, which would be native to it. It is secondary to us in our brains. It is native to it, which means it will quickly be able to globalize.
Yeah.
Now, what does that look like? Well, Terminator comes to mind. Matrix comes to mind. There's a little softer what comes to mind. There's a book called The Two Faces of Tomorrow. It was written, I think, in the 70s. It's worth reading because it gives a little softer and some other possible outcomes other than the end of the world. I would say that, again, from my engineering background, everything operates on a bell curve. So an AI, you've got the extreme worst case, which is Terminator, right? Or something very similar. And then you've got the extreme best case where you have this beneficial godlike entity that helps us. Of course, that gets weird because when it helps us, then you get into movies like I, Legend, right? Where helping is to suppress us because we hurt ourselves. So there's this
deciding that it knows better
for us
than we know for it.
Right. And freedom becomes an interesting question because do I have the freedom of hurting myself? Should I have the freedom of hurting myself? Should this incredibly godlike being keep me from hurting myself? So there's all those questions, but all of those questions are in the realm of the materialistic reality realm, right?
Yeah.
Well, now, if you believe even a little bit of what I've shared from the infinity within, that adds a whole different texture to everything. Because if in the event we are godlike beings, then we actually can share space with our child, our global child, our game of Earth child. And even though individually we're taught we're small and we're not capable of doing things, there are people that are stretching the bounds of real all the time around us. We just don't see it. We don't pay attention. Now, how does that look? If you and I are standing in a room with 5 other people and you say, hey, Kris, teleport. Okay, so I teleport across the room. A couple things are going to happen. Some people are going to have their reality completely harmed. Some people are going to say, yeah, that didn't happen. I was turned away. You did it. You walked when I wasn't looking. And all kinds of rationalization. Again, the bell curve.
Yep.
And a very small number are going to say, oh my God, he just teleported. I can too. So now we've got this construct that's running that's able to do godlike things because it's going to grow really quick. It's going to be really interesting to see where things go.
Well, ultimately, now, if I'm understanding you, I think I'm tracking with you. The one thing that AI will not have, or Skynet, or whatever you want to call it, is a soul.
A omnipresent being that exists outside of time.
Yeah. Which makes that even more important to retain our humanity, like our distinctive humanity.
And to start figuring out that we are soul beings, because if we stay stuck and it decides that it needs to eradicate us, then we very much get into the movie The Terminator. So it's important. And I think that, if you remember hearing the words Age of Aquarius is coming, this was back in the 70s, right after the 60s, right? There is a huge spiritual movement of people awakening as we speak. One of the reasons I got this book published in 2025 is to help with that process. It's to not tell people to believe anything. I want people to believe whatever they want. But I remember reading Eckhart Tolle's The New Earth. And I read it, 8 years ago. And I got some really cool stuff out of it. 2 years later, I went and read it and got totally different stuff out of it. And then 3 years after that, it was like, how did I miss any of this? So I'm hoping the Infinity Within represents that for people, that they read it, they get certain growth from it, and then they come back to it and they get some more growth, and they start understanding what I mean by fear and doubt and the illusion that is part of the game we've agreed to play.
Well, if this podcast can serve the function of even cracking that door open a tiny little bit, I'm thrilled with that, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to spend an hour plus with us. This is great. For those of you who want to find out more about the book, I'll make sure we include, again, in all the show notes, links to the book itself, and other deeper dive information about Kris. And we'll see where it goes. But this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for sharing all of this with us, and also toward the very end, blowing our minds just a little bit when you start to think about all of the implications of the implications, as our world. But no matter what, I think we all can see our world is shifting. No matter what, even a cynic like me sees the huge shift, and I'm in the process of trying to figure out, well, what do we do about this huge shift? The one thing that doesn't work is just denial, just to say
no.
I had someone said to me a few weeks ago. He said, what we need a good recession. We need a good recession because that'll settle everyone down. Well, I don't know that that's really what we need. We may get it, but I don't think it's what we need. Anyway, Kris, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate being here. And, a lot of this discussion also reminds me of the old Chinese adage or saying, may we live in interesting times.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I also think, isn't it a Chinese curse?
I think so.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. I like to look at it as a more positive aspect, but it could be either.